Hello, this is Jerry Morton. Welcome to my Finding My Way podcast. This is podcast number 54, titled Second Lieutenant Ken Strauss. Podcasts 34 through 61 are stories from the year of Army training I experienced. The training started in August 1966 and ended in June 1967. The stories are published in the book Reluctant Lieutenant, From Basic to OCS in the 60s, which was published by Texas A&M University Press as a military history. Second Lieutenant Ken Strauss is an account of Jerry's platoon in infantry OCS getting a new tactical training officer, TAC, in the spring of 1967. The TAC quickly earned his respect as Jerry tried to fulfill new tasks assigned him, including being an instructor, writing a poem, and fulfilling the role of acting platoon leader. Second Lieutenant Ken Strauss. His eyes were what you noticed first. They were steady. They did not look at you and dart away. When he looked at you, they revealed nothing of the thoughts behind them. The guy could have been an officer in the Prussian army of old. Leanness, ramrod straight posture, short black hair shadowing his skull, finely chiseled facial structure, and earnestness constantly in his expression created a no-nonsense air about him. A black leather brace worn over his left thumb with an accompanying black leather strap wrapped around his wrist provided the final touch of his superb military image. Our tactical officer had arrived. Immediately, we began passing inspections. He quickly and efficiently told us what improvements to make. They worked. The other TACs significantly decreased their surprise visits to our area. Their spontaneous harassment of us in the mess hall, on the parade ground, and during training also diminished. Lieutenant Strauss established a weekly teaching training session. He set aside one mid-afternoon in the middle of each week for that purpose. A candidate was selected to instruct the whole platoon on some military issue. The lieutenant explained that we would constantly be training the troops assigned to us. We needed to get comfortable doing it. My turn to instruct the platoon came. I had a week to prepare. Strauss took notes during the presentations. Apparently, he used them to help him form an overall evaluation of each of us. I was not concerned about a grade. It was important to me that he thought well of me. In the end, I knew it did not make any difference. As long as I got passing grades to the classes I took and did not break any major rules, I was going to graduate. I was ultimately going to be an infantry platoon leader in Vietnam. Knowing that, it still mattered to me that Lieutenant Strauss respected me. There are men like that. There is just something about them that you know is good. It becomes important to you that they value you. Lieutenant Strauss was one of those men. Most of the instruction presented by the other candidates had been poor. In my opinion, their greatest sin was boredom. Close on the heels of that was their lack of humor. They all knew the material they taught. Obviously, they had memorized some military task, lesson, or whatever from one of the military manuals that had been issued to us. When they made their presentations in the aisle between our cubicles, the biggest task was staying awake. Since the guys were all platoon mates, you did not want to embarrass them. You stayed awake. You asked meaningful questions at the end you were sure they could answer. Then it was over. Hell, I was going to have some fun with this task. I had done a semester of high school student teaching to obtain my Kentucky teacher certificate. Then I spent 2 years in graduate school teaching undergraduate classes for my major professor during his absences and teaching study skills to the university football team. I had also taught a summer at a junior college. On top of that, my master's degree work was, after all, in school psychology. I was trained to assist teachers and to utilize good educational strategies. There was no question in my military mind that I was a good teacher. My task was not to prove that point. My task was to have fun with the guys and get a few ideas across that might help them. That helping part was not as important to me as the having fun part was. How to be stealthy on a combat patrol was my topic. There were no military manuals that directly addressed the topic I selected. We had gotten bits and pieces of it from our training in basic and AIT. You would have thought the Army could have been more helpful on this topic, since rumor had it that going out on patrol was a major part of the infantryman's job in Nam. I got Nate to agree to help me. He would slip into the cubicle next to the largest collection of the men in the aisle. Once there, he would hide behind a partition. On my cue, he would yell, "Hooty-hoo! Hooty-hoo!" His cue would be my saying something about strange sounds in the night. The presentation was to be about a half hour long or so, with a question and answer period after it. All told, the performance was to last about an hour. The time had arrived. Lieutenant Strauss stood at the back of the assembled group. Nate was in his hiding spot. I had to be subtle in my switch from straight military instruction to humor on the side. If it appeared to Strauss that I was ridiculing the whole OCS training program, I just might be in trouble. The presentation started straight enough. I greeted the men in the identical manner used by the vast majority of military instructors who had addressed us from the present OCS classes on back to basic. Standing before the group at rigid parade rest, with eyes fixed on nothingness, I said in a deep, commanding voice, "Greetings, men. Today we are going to learn how to be stealthy on combat patrol. You will learn the proper nomenclature, the proper strategies to use, and how to implement them. Are there any questions?" Without pausing for any questions to be asked, as we had been taught to do by example, I launched into a monotone presentation of old facts we all knew. This part of the presentation was important to set the stage for the finale. Silence, blending in with your surroundings, and surprise were the key elements of stealth I emphasized. Every successful operation is a success because of pre-planning and prepared troops, I said, echoing dozens of past instructors. Then I addressed the need for taping down metal objects, such as canteens, ammo clips, the buckles on backpacks, backpack contents, such as metal C rations, compasses, rifle slings, and the like. Giving silent commands and using hand and arm signals were discussed next. These pieces of information consumed about 20 minutes. The men's eyes had that glassy stare. They were looking straight ahead into nowhere. Clearly, they were mesmerized by my stereotypical military presentation. So far, I had been successful. It was now time to move beyond the realm of reality. "Now, men, imagine that you are in country," I intoned. "This is it. Tomorrow, in the pre-dawn hours, you will lead your men into the dangers of the jungle. Make sure they are well fed. Bring in a couple of cases of the pork and beans that you got on sale from the honey bun truck. Make sure every man eats his fill. Your thoughtfulness will promote loyalty from the troops. Pass out rolls of duct tape for them to use to secure their web gear. Wrap some of the tape around your mouth and approach the men with a finger to your covered lips. They will know what you mean and appreciate the reminder. Naturally, you can't sleep. This is your first combat patrol. You don't want to make the men nervous. They have to feel confident in your leadership. You feign sleep. The silence is broken only by the muffled breaking of wind you and the troops experience. The music of the moment grabs you. It is beautiful in the jungle. Things just never seem real without background music. Now that music is in your ears, the offense to your nostrils is of no concern. Charlie likes that smell. He will relax his guard. It might be the very edge that makes a difference in a combat moment. You gather your men around you at the demarcation point. When you leave the safety of the wired compound, you know this is for real. You and your men are on your own in the darkness. A last-minute check makes sure all is in order. You pass out cigarettes from the hoard you collected out of C ration packs to the men who forgot theirs. When you stop for a rest on the trail, the men can light up. It will calm their nerves. The smell of cigarette smoke in the middle of the jungle is reassuring to troops surrounded by the unfamiliar scents coming from the jungle floor. Rumor has it that Charlie loves the smell too. lulling the enemy into a false sense of security is a tactical advantage. I issue my instructions in a hushed but brisk tone as I pace back and forth in front of my platoon mates. With hunched back, I continue in a conspiratorial manner. The men have lost their glazed OCS classroom stare. They are with me. Big grins are showing up. Lieutenant Strauss has stopped looking at the ceiling. He is hard to read, but it is clear he is not openly angry. I have his attention. Now you're on the trail, I continue. The pre-dawn light has yet to come. It's hard to see the ground. You hope the frequent snapping of twigs being stomped on by you and the others sounds like the chirping of jungle tree frogs. The loud crackling of the radio on the back of the platoon radio man is the only thing that keeps you calm. There is comfort in the familiar. Suddenly, a horrible cry comes from the trees above you. You freeze. The jungle sounds are all strange, new, unexplainable things that might be the harbinger of danger. Again, that nerve-wracking cry. Could it be a jungle bird? Hooty-hoo! Hooty-hoo! Nate screamed from behind the cubicle wall. Instantly, Lieutenant Strauss spun in the direction of the cry and roared with laughter. It triggered everyone else. Pandemonium broke out. Nate responded with an even louder hooty-hoo! Men, I shouted above the laughter and twisting of bodies as guys tried to catch a glimpse of Nate in his hiding place. Men, don't let the unexpected control you. Be prepared for the unusual. Your men are looking to you for leadership. Freeze in your tracks and think. A bird in the jungle isn't worth a revealing sound on the trail. That's what you must remember about being stealthy on the trail. Are there any questions? That last comment prompted even more laughter. There were no questions. The guys were having too good a time commenting to each other over the shenanigans of the moment. I dismissed them. Not long after my tour of duty as a military instructor, Lieutenant Strauss caught me with a can of furniture polish firmly clutched in my hand during evening study hall. Braced at attention, with the counterband in my hand, I did not know what to expect as he circled me. He had the slightest hint of a compressed smile on his lips. My cubicle mates stood at attention, trying to avoid eyeballing either of us. These kind of scenes were tense. Lieutenant Strauss leaned toward my ear and whispered, "I want a military poem on my desk by 0800 hours tomorrow morning. Got that?" "Sir, yes, sir," came my loud reply. Calmly and quietly, Lieutenant Strauss eased out of our cubicle and continued his inspection of the platoon bay. We instituted the tried and true system. After lights out, we posted guards and lifted the typewriter. I wrote the impromptu poem while someone held the flashlight. As I composed it, another candidate typed it for me. After I finished, the typewriter was returned. The military poem was left on Lieutenant Strauss's desk for his reading at 0800. The poem, which alluded to the necessity of picking a few soldiers to cover a retreat, read as follows: Rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat, too many to stop, too many to save. Rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat, a few to remain so many can live. Rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat, who to select, who to remain. Rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat, to leave the best, to leave a friend. Rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat, so others can live, so others can die. Rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat, you have to decide who lives and who dies. Rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat, it echoes as long as you live. Rat-a-tat-tat. Lieutenant Strauss never said a word to me about the poem. A few days later, it was posted on the platoon bulletin board. Weeks went by. I was informed that I was to be the acting platoon leader. Every week, one of the candidates was selected to be acting platoon leader. The platoon leader got to appoint acting squad leaders for that week. The team then carried out the routines expected of them. The acting platoon leader reported to Lieutenant Strauss every morning to receive the day's orders. A lot of the guys changed when they became platoon leader. They began lording it over the rest of us. A few of the guys held it together pretty well. They were clearly in the minority. At the end of the week, everyone in the platoon evaluated the platoon leader. Somehow those evaluations played a part in the overall process of determining whether or not a candidate graduated and received his commission. It was important to do as well as you could. Most of my week as platoon leader was spent in the field practicing ambushes. We were trucked out fairly far into the woods and got back late at night. There was no significant drilling. I was feeling pretty good about the week. From my perspective, there was never a legitimate reason to scream and shout at people to get them to do what they were supposed to do. Everyone in the platoon was highly motivated to do the best job they could. If they messed up, there was a reason. They needed assistance instead of orders to do more push-ups. Tuesday and Wednesday were long days in the field. We marched and played war games, practicing setting up an ambush and then rushing off to another location. As we hurried through the woods, we were always in a hurry. I was impressed with their beauty. We entered marshy, flat ground nestled between the wooded hills. Shallow streams crisscrossed the level ground. Between them were large stretches of bright green moss. The leaves on the trees had yet to come forth, which allowed the sun to shine directly on the moss. I wish I had had the time to stay and look at it. Instead, we sank ankle deep into the wet moss, leaving ugly mud puddles in the empty holes. Our combat boots were caked with mud. Toes became wrinkled because we wore water-soaked socks all day. We tracked mud into the barracks, badly marring our highly shined floors. The gear we wore was in no better shape. Splotches of dried mud covered our web belts, packs, and canteen covers. By Wednesday night, we had lost our shining edge. I was not concerned. The guys knew what to do to get everything back into military shape for the Saturday morning inspection. We would get it done and get our off-post weekend pass. It was becoming a fairly regular routine. Actually, I preferred my week as platoon leader to be in the field. They did not harass us as much in the field as they did when we were back on post. They called being on post garrison duty. Besides, when you were in the field, the platoon leader was less likely to have to call out all those fancy marching commands. You know, column right, march! 2 steps to the rear, march! Prepare to stack arms! Stack arms! And all of that old manual of arms stuff. I had not had a chance to practice giving those orders. I was afraid I would mess up and make a fool of myself. Being in the field was just fine with me. First thing Thursday morning, Lieutenant Strauss informed me that he was going to conduct a major inspection at 1600 hours that afternoon. We would get back from our afternoon classes at about 1500 hours. He said he expected us to be back up to our regular inspection standards by 1600 hours. All of our gear was to be clean. There was a lot to do and almost no time to do it in. I called the squad leaders together. We had our marching orders. They got with their guys. The rush was on. "Attention!" someone shouted in a cubicle near the bay doors. Lieutenant Strauss stood there, his swagger stick impatiently slapping the side of his perfectly creased fatigue pants. The starch in them was so thick that he must have forced his legs into the trousers. They had opened just enough to allow the contour of his legs to push a hole into them that ultimately made a perfect curve around his thin runner's legs. The tightly tailored remains stayed stuck together, accentuating the crease into a rigid knife blade preceding the rest of his body. The man looked sharp. Rapidly, I marched to the front of the bay and smartly saluted. "Sir, 5th Platoon is ready for inspection, sir!" Without a word, he returned my salute. He walked into the first cubicle. All 3 of the candidates living there stood at rigid attention in front of their bunks. It was the usual drill. Lieutenant Strauss went straight to their wall lockers. I followed slightly behind. He motioned for me to look inside the first one. As I leaned forward to see, he pointed his swagger stick at the pack stuck into a corner at the bottom of it. I could see mud on the shoulder straps. A stiff brush would have removed it with just a few strokes. Obviously, those strokes had not been applied. The lieutenant shook his head. He gave me the briefest look of dismay. Damn, I thought. There's no excuse for that. Hell, everyone was busy, but this slip was so obvious. Why had the guy let something so simple go undone? We moved to the next wall locker. He picked up a pair of combat boots. There were thin traces of mud in the crack where the sole is attached to the leather. He held the offending shoes up to my face for me to get a good view and shook his head in silence. The slam of the shoes hitting the floor of the wall locker seemed to echo throughout the bay. In the next cubicle, he found caked mud under one of the bunks. Someone had kicked it to the far end of the bunk, up against the cubicle divider. He motioned for me to get down on my hands and knees to look at it with him. The swagger stick swished it out into the center of the cubicle. Picking it up with his black leather-wrapped hand, he ground the mud into dust and let it slowly fall to the floor. The clenching of his jaw told me how irritated he was. The third cubicle was no better. The green wool blanket on the bottom bunk was covered with multicolored splotches of dried mud that told the story of a last-minute attempt to smear it away. It was a pitiful attempt that just made matters worse. The streaks were clearly visible. "What's that shuffling sound back there?" the lieutenant demanded as he rushed to a cubicle and back. I had heard it too. We both knew full well what the sound was. Someone was attempting to do some last-minute cleaning instead of standing at attention. Entering the offending cubicle in quick, long strides, he glared at the men standing there. They looked straight ahead. Only Gene's eyes broke the military brace. They were wide. The whiteness totally rimmed his pupils. The lieutenant knew what it meant. He just did not know the why of it. "Which one is your wall locker?" he sternly whispered into Gene's face. Sir, the second one, sir." Taking his time, as if he knew that his prey had been caught in a trap with no possibility of escape, the lieutenant walked to the wall locker. He moved the door wider open with his swagger stick. "I am not believing this!" he screamed. We all started at the abrupt change in the loudness of his voice. This was out of character. This was bad. Lieutenant Strauss reached down into the locker, threw out a backpack, and then came up with a pair of mud-caked combat boots. As he brought them out, large chunks of mud fell off of them onto the floor. He wheeled to confront me with the boots. Holding them to my nose momentarily before he smashed them to the floor, he glared at me and hissed, "Candidate, I want to talk to you in the stairwell." With that, he wheeled and stomped down the aisle with me in pursuit. The swinging doors continued to swing as we stood on the landing. He turned to me with those Strauss eyes burning and said, "Do you think this is a game? Do you think I'm playing with you? You get these men into shape. Do you hear me? I will inspect this place at 0900 hours Saturday morning. You had better get this place clean." Before I could respond, he twisted away from me and bolted down the steps. My shouted, "Sir, yes, sir," bounced off his back as he disappeared from view on the second-floor landing. Slamming the platoon bay doors, I shouted, "Squad leaders, to the front!" I was angry. They had embarrassed me before the lieutenant. They had known what had to be done. Just because I was a nice, easygoing guy, they had thought they did not need to do what was right. I could not believe it. They had let me down on my watch. They had humiliated me because I was easygoing. I was pissed. The 4 squad leaders walked to the front. We stood at a distance from the rest of the men, but I kept my voice low so they could not overhear our discussion. "By God, you had better get these men in shape," I said. The lieutenant is coming back at 0900 Saturday to re-inspect. We're going to pass that inspection. I don't give a damn if we have to stay up all night Friday. This place is going to be spotless. Do you understand? Do you know how angry I am? I demanded. It's okay, Jerry. We'll get it done, Mel said, trying to calm me. Hell, it's not okay, I shot back. I can't believe Gene didn't even try to knock the mud off his damn boots. He probably did it on purpose to make me look bad for my messing up on one of his details a week or two ago. Oh, no, Jerry. You're wrong, Scotty said, shaking his head with a worried look. Listen, we'll take care of this. You just stay out of it. We'll see that we pass the inspection. Don't talk to any of the other guys. We'll give you updates on how we're doing. Let us handle this, okay? Yeah, you're right. I'll stay out of it, but you all keep me posted on how they're doing. I felt somewhat chastened by Scotty's level-headed response. It was all I could do not to comment, to tell someone what to do. Basically, I just looked around. I could not suppress my angry eyes, but I did manage to keep my mouth shut. They worked hard. Everyone scrubbed and cleaned as fast as they could. Finally, I just stayed in my cubicle, working on my own gear. Scotty and Mel stated the obvious. There had not been enough time for anyone to get ready for Lieutenant Strauss's inspection that Thursday afternoon. We could not have passed it. I knew they were right, but my stuff would have passed. I had gotten myself ready for the inspection. If I had done it the first time, they could have too. It just did not add up. If I could do it, everyone else could do it. They just failed to work hard enough the first time. I thought everyone maintained the standards I did. It was the only way to survive this place, went my reasoning. Apparently, I was wrong. Attention! Came the cry at 0900 sharp that Saturday. Smartly saluting, I stated, Sir, 5th Platoon is ready for inspection, sir. Lieutenant Strauss returned my salute without comment. He entered the first cubicle. He carefully looked each man up and down and observed every wall locker with equal care. He moved items around with his swagger stick. No words were spoken. Cubicle after cubicle, the pattern was the same. After he had inspected all of the cubicles, he walked to the front of the bay. I followed at a respectful pace behind him. At the bay doors, he turned to face me. Without expression, he stated, The platoon has passed inspection. They have off-post privileges. Bracing to attention, I saluted sharply, saying, Sir, yes, sir. He returned the salute and left. No other words were exchanged. I was relieved, but not happy. I knew that I had lost it on Thursday afternoon. I had lost my emotional composure. I had been an asshole to the guys. Sunday afternoon, Scotty, Mel, and I went to the Post Theater. Before the movie started, we went through the mandatory standing at attention and saluting the flag on the screen during the national anthem. It seemed so redundant to do it. It was as if our intelligence and loyalty were being questioned every time we went to see a movie. Nonetheless, we did it. It was the Army way. After the film, I apologized to Scotty and Mel for losing it. They were pretty good about it. Yes, I had lost it, but it was the first time. Everyone else had lost it a lot more times than that, but everyone else did not matter to me. I had been a foolish ass. Now I had to live with it. I appreciated their words of comfort, but the truth was as it was.